I stood in my husband's corner office, watching him sign papers without even looking at me. Brad had just made a major decision about Hartwell Industries without consulting me, and when I questioned him, his face turned red with rage. He slammed his pen down and stood up, towering over me. His voice was cold, cutting through me like ice. "You're just a woman, not an asset," he snapped. The words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. I felt my legs weaken as he grabbed his coat and stormed out, leaving me alone in that massive office, tears streaming down my face. I barely slept that night. Brad never came home. I lay in our king-size bed, staring at the ceiling of our colonial house in suburban Ohio, replaying those words over and over. "You're just a woman, not an asset." 12 years of marriage, and that's what I was to him. Not a partner. Not even a person. Just something he could dismiss. The next morning, I drove to Hartwell Industries headquarters before sunrise. The building looked different somehow, more imposing than usual. My father had built this company from nothing, turning a small machine shop into a manufacturing powerhouse. After he died 7 years ago, Brad had taken over as CEO. I'd always worked in operations, thinking I was contributing, thinking I mattered. I parked in my usual spot and walked through the employee entrance, nodding at security. The hallways were empty this early, fluorescent lights humming overhead. I needed to clear my head, figure out what to do next. Was I really going to leave my marriage? After 12 years? What about Jake and Emma, our kids? I was standing in the hallway near Brad's office when I heard voices. Brad arrived with his entire management team, at least 8 people in expensive suits, carrying briefcases and coffee cups. He walked right past me without even acknowledging my presence. Like I was invisible. Like I was furniture. They filed into the large conference room for what was clearly an important meeting. Through the glass walls, I could see them taking seats around the massive oak table. Brad stood at the head, already talking, gesturing with his hands the way he did when he was excited about something. Angela, Brad's secretary, touched my arm gently. Angela was in her late 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes. She'd worked for my father for 15 years before Brad took over, which meant she'd been with the company for 25 years total. "Juanita," she whispered urgently, "we need to talk, now." She pulled me into a small empty office down the hall and closed the door. Her hands were shaking. "I saw something yesterday," she said quietly. "I was filing documents in Brad's office, and I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. When I picked them up, I saw legal documents. Trust documents, with your name on them." I felt confused. "What kind of documents?" Angela took a deep breath. "Juanita, do you know what your father left you?" I nodded slowly. "Some stock in the company. A memorial stake," Brad called it. "Maybe 5 or 10%. It was in a trust that matured when I turned 35. "That was 3 months ago," Angela said. "Have you checked the actual documents?" I shook my head. "Brad handles all our financial stuff. He said it wasn't worth worrying about." Angela's expression changed to something between anger and pity. "Juanita, you don't own 5 or 10%. You own 48% of Hartwell Industries. You own nearly half this company." The room seemed to tilt. "What? Your father left you 48%. Brad only owns 32%. The rest is divided among smaller shareholders. Without your approval, Brad can't make any major corporate decisions. He needs your vote." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Angela's voice dropped even lower. "Because Brad's been planning a merger with Westfield Corp. He wants to combine the companies and become CEO of the new entity. It would make him incredibly powerful and wealthy, but he needs shareholder approval. He needs your approval. And based on what I overheard, he's planning to announce it in that meeting right now, acting like he has full authority." I looked through the glass wall of the office we were in. I could see into the conference room where Brad was presenting something on a screen, the board members nodding along. "You need to go in there," Angela urged. "You need to tell them." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. But I stood up, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward that conference room. My hand touched the door handle. I could hear Brad's voice, confident and commanding. I opened the door. The conversation stopped immediately. Every head turned toward me. Brad's expression went from surprise to irritation in half a second. "This is a closed board meeting, Juanita," he said firmly. "Please leave." I stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind me. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I own 48% of this company. I believe that gives me the right to attend board meetings." The silence that followed was deafening. Brad's face went completely white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Several board members looked at each other in confusion. One of them, Harold Green, the company's CFO, flipped through papers in front of him quickly. "She's right," Harold said quietly. "Julia Hartwell is listed as primary shareholder, 48.2%. Brad sat down heavily in his chair, speechless, exactly as I'd imagined he might be. But it only lasted about 10 seconds. Then he laughed. It was a practiced laugh, smooth and dismissive. He looked around at the board members with an expression that said, "Can you believe this?" "Juanita, honey," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I think you're confused about some legal matters. Yes, you inherited stock from your father, but it's complicated. There are voting structures, corporate bylaws. Why don't we discuss this at home, and I'll explain everything." Several board members shifted uncomfortably but didn't say anything. Brad was already moving on, turning back to his presentation. "As I was saying before the interruption," he continued, "the merger with Westfield represents an incredible opportunity." I stood there, frozen, as he completely dismissed me in front of everyone who mattered. The board members avoided my eyes. They were going to let him do this. They were going to pretend I hadn't said anything. I turned and walked out of that conference room, my cheeks burning with humiliation. But something had changed. I knew the truth now. I owned nearly half of Hartwell Industries. The problem was, now Brad knew I knew. And as I walked back to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my keys, I realized I'd just made myself a target. Brad came home that evening with an enormous bouquet of roses and a bottle of expensive champagne. I was in the kitchen, having picked up Emma from soccer practice and helped Jake with his algebra homework, going through the motions of normal life while my mind spun. "Baby, I am so sorry," Brad said, setting the flowers on the counter. He looked genuinely remorseful, his eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I was completely shocked this morning. I had no idea you didn't know about the full extent of your inheritance. That's on me. I should have walked you through all of it when the trust matured." I stared at him, not sure what to say. He popped the champagne cork and poured 2 glasses. "The truth is, I've always seen us as partners, real partners, you and me, building on what your father started. This company is as much yours as it is mine. More yours, really. It's your legacy." He handed me a glass and clinked his against it. "To us," he said. "To true partnership." Over the next 3 days, Brad was a completely different person. He was the man I'd fallen in love with 16 years ago, when I was a 24-year-old operations coordinator, and he was the ambitious new VP my father had just hired. He made me breakfast every morning. He planned a vacation to the Caribbean, just the 2 of us. He was affectionate and attentive, and present in a way he hadn't been in at least 5 years. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the shock of the board meeting had somehow reset our marriage, reminded him of what we used to have. On the 4th day, he brought up the paperwork. We were having coffee on our back deck, watching the sun come up. Brad reached over and took my hand. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about how to make our partnership official, legal, clear, so there's never any confusion again." "What do you mean?" I asked. He explained that he'd scheduled a meeting with our attorney, Gregory Walsh, to update our corporate documents and our personal estate planning. "Just to make sure everything's clean and protected," he said, "for both of us. for the kids. It made sense, or at least, it seemed to make sense. When you've been married to someone for 12 years, you want to trust them. You want to believe the person you chose to build a life with isn't lying to you. The meeting with Gregory Walsh was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Brad and I drove there together in his Mercedes. He held my hand in the car. We talked about Emma's upcoming band concert and whether Jake would make the varsity basketball team. Gregory's office was in a glass building downtown, all modern furniture and abstract art. He greeted us warmly, shaking both our hands, and led us into his conference room. There were documents already laid out on the table, at least 50 pages total. "So," Gregory began, "Brad explained that you both want to formalize your corporate partnership and update your estate planning. Very wise. I've prepared documents that will clarify ownership structures, voting rights, and succession planning." He slid the first document toward me. "This is a corporate partnership agreement," he explained. "It maintains your ownership percentage, but consolidates voting rights under a unified management structure." I started reading. The language was dense, full of legal terms I didn't fully understand. But as I got to page 3, something caught my eye. Voting rights assigned to primary managing partner. "Who's the primary managing partner?" I asked. "That would be Brad, as CEO," Gregory said smoothly. "But you maintain full ownership rights and profit sharing. This just streamlines decision-making so the company can move quickly on opportunities. Like the Westfield merger." I kept reading. Page 7 made it clearer. "Juanita Hartwell assigns all voting rights associated with her 48.2% ownership stake to Bradford Hartwell, CEO, in perpetuity." I looked up at Brad. "This gives you complete control." He smiled reassuringly. "Only for operational decisions, honey. You still own everything. This just makes it so we don't have to have a board vote every time we want to make a move. It's more efficient." I flipped to the next document. It was a post-nuptial agreement. I'd never heard of updating a prenup after marriage. But apparently it was possible. This document outlined what would happen to all our assets in case of divorce. Page 12 made my blood run cold. "In the event of marital dissolution, Juanita Hartwell waives all claims to Hartwell Industries stock, company assets, and corporate holdings. Bradford Hartwell retains full ownership of all business interests." I pushed the documents away. "No." Brad's smile faltered. "What?" "I'm not signing these," I said, my voice shaking. "These documents would give you everything and leave me with nothing. If we got divorced, I'd lose the company my father built." Gregory started to speak, but Brad held up a hand. He looked at me for a long moment, and then his expression changed completely. The warmth drained from his eyes like someone had flipped a switch. "You're not signing?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. Brad stood up. "Fine. Then let me be clear about what happens next." He walked to the window, his back to me. "If you don't sign these documents, I will make your life impossible. You think that scene in the boardroom was bad? That was nothing. I will destroy you, Juanita. I will turn our children against you. I will make sure every person in our social circle knows you're trying to sabotage the family business out of greed. I will paint you as mentally unstable, vindictive, and incompetent." He turned around, and I barely recognized him. This was a stranger, and just so you know, I've been sleeping with Diane for 2 years. Diane from operations. Your friend. She's smarter than you, more ambitious than you, and a hell of a lot better in bed. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Diane was someone I had lunch with once a week, someone I'd confided in about my marriage problems. "If you fight me on this," Brad continued, "I will make sure you lose everything. The company, the kids, your reputation. I'll have you declared mentally incompetent. Gregory here will testify that you seemed confused and unstable during this meeting. Won't you, Gregory?" Gregory nodded slightly, not meeting my eyes. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. I grabbed my purse and ran out of that conference room, down the hallway, into the elevator. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely press the button for the lobby. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat and sobbed. Not just because of what Brad had said, but because I finally understood the truth. This wasn't a marriage. It had never been a marriage. Brad had seen me as an asset to acquire, just like the company. He'd married me to get closer to my father's business. And now that I stood in his way, I was expendable. I'd thought escaping his emotional abuse was the challenge. But this was something far worse. This was calculated, strategic destruction, and I had no idea how to fight it. I called Patricia Hendricks from my car. Patricia was a corporate attorney I'd met at a charity fundraiser 3 years ago. We'd stayed in touch, had coffee a few times. She was tough, sharp, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. "I need help," I told her. I explained everything in a rush, barely pausing for breath. "Come to my office right now," she said. "Don't go home. Come here." Patricia's office was in a different building downtown, smaller and less flashy than Gregory Walsh's. She met me in the lobby and brought me upstairs. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. She took notes, asked questions, and didn't seem shocked by any of it. "Your ownership is legitimate," she finally said. "The trust documents are solid. Your father's will was clear. You own 48.2% of Hartwell Industries, and Brad can't change that without your consent." "So I can stop the merger?" I asked. "Absolutely. You can attend the next board meeting and formally vote against it. Without your approval, the merger can't proceed." Relief flooded through me. "Okay, when's the next meeting?" Patricia checked her phone. "There's an emergency board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, 3 days from now." "Perfect," I said. "I'll be there." But over the next 3 days, Brad launched an assault from every direction. First, he started working on our kids. Jake was 15. Emma was 13. They were at that age where they worshipped their father and thought their mother was embarrassing. Brad took full advantage. He moved out of our house and into a suite at the Marriott downtown, playing the wounded victim. He called Jake and Emma every night, having long emotional conversations that ended with them angry at me. When I asked Jake what his father had said, he exploded. "Dad said you're trying to destroy his company because you're jealous of his success," Jake shouted. "He said you're being selfish and you don't care about our family." Emma was worse. She came home from school one day and wouldn't even look at me. She went straight to her room and locked the door. When I knocked, she yelled through it, "Why are you doing this to Dad? He's done everything for us." I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. Brad had poisoned them against me in less than 72 hours. Then our friends started calling. Brad had apparently spent the weekend reaching out to everyone in our social circle with his version of events. Margaret, a woman I'd been friends with for 8 years, called me sounding concerned. "Juanita, honey, Brad told us what's happening. Are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? A therapist, maybe?" "I'm fine," I said, confused. "Why would I need a therapist?" "Brad said you've been acting erratically lately, making wild accusations. He's worried about you." One by one, my friends called with similar messages. By Monday night, I felt completely isolated. The people I thought would support me were treating me like I was having a breakdown, but I still had the board meeting on Tuesday. I got up early, put on my best suit, and drove to Hartwell Industries. Patricia met me in the parking lot. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded, even though my stomach was in knots. We walked into the building together. Security nodded us through. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor where the boardroom was located. But when we walked into the conference room, I immediately knew something was wrong. Brad was standing at the head of the table, smiling. The board members were all in their seats. And sitting right next to Brad was Gregory Walsh. Brad waited until I sat down, then cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I want to address some concerns that have been raised about corporate governance and shareholder rights." He nodded to Gregory, who stood up and placed a document on the table. This is a power of attorney, executed by Juanita Hartwell 3 years ago, Gregory explained. It grants Bradford Hartwell complete authority over her business interests in the event of her incapacity or inability to manage corporate affairs. I felt cold all over. I never signed that. Gregory slid the document down the table toward me. Your signature is notarized right there on page 4. I looked at the signature. It looked exactly like mine. The date was from 3 years ago. The notary stamp looked official, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed this document. This is a forgery, I said, my voice shaking. Brad sighed heavily, like he'd expected this. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Juanita's been making increasingly irrational claims. First, she accused me of embezzling. Then she claimed I forged legal documents. Gregory, show them the emails. Gregory produced printouts of email exchanges. I scanned them quickly. They appeared to be from my email address, sent to Brad over the past few months, making wild accusations about corporate fraud, hidden assets, conspiracy theories. I never sent these, I said. Brad looked at the board members with an expression of deep sadness. I love my wife, but she's not well. I've been trying to get her help, but she refuses. And now she's trying to sabotage a merger that would be incredibly beneficial for this company and all of its employees. Harold, the CFO, spoke up. Given the power of attorney, and given Brad's legal authority to act on Juanita's behalf, I move that we proceed with the merger vote. Another board member seconded. They voted 8-0 in favor of moving forward with the Westfield merger. I looked at Patricia in panic. She stood up immediately. We'll be filing an injunction, she announced. This power of attorney is fraudulent, and we'll prove it. The board members looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The meeting adjourned. As everyone filed out, Brad walked past me and leaned in close. You're going to lose everything, he whispered. And you did this to yourself. Patricia filed for an emergency injunction that afternoon. But the judge, a man named Walter Brennan, who apparently played golf with Brad every Saturday, denied it. He said the power of attorney appeared valid on its face, and the burden was on me to prove it was forged. That would take time. The merger was scheduled to close in 10 days, and then Brad dropped the next bomb. That night, I was served with divorce papers. Brad was filing for dissolution of marriage, requesting full custody of Jake and Emma, and citing my increasingly erratic behavior and attempts to sabotage the family's financial security as reasons. The custody petition was devastating. Brad presented text messages, emails, and testimony from Gregory Walsh, claiming I'd been acting unstable and irrational. He'd already introduced Jake and Emma to Diane, positioning her as their future stepmom, someone stable and supportive. Patricia did her best, but we were losing on every single front. The legal system was moving too slowly to stop the merger. The judge in the custody case was clearly sympathetic to Brad. My children wouldn't speak to me. My friends had abandoned me. I sat in my kitchen late that night, alone in a house that suddenly felt enormous and empty, and realized that the woman who'd walked into that boardroom thinking she owned half a company was being systematically erased. Brad had corrupted every system I'd tried to use against him. Every move I made just gave him more ammunition, and I had no idea what to do next. Patricia hired a forensic document examiner named Dr. Robert Yang. He was based in Cleveland, about 2 hours away, and specialized in detecting forgeries. I drove there on a Thursday morning, bringing the power of attorney document that Gregory had presented. Dr. Yang spent 3 hours examining it under microscopes and special lighting. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. It's definitely forged, he said. The signature was created using a digital scanning technique. Whoever did this scanned your real signature from another document and transferred it onto this one. It's sophisticated work, but under magnification, you can see the pixel artifacts. Can you testify to that in court? Patricia asked. She'd driven up with me. Dr. Yang hesitated. I can, but here's the problem. This level of forgery requires expert analysis to detect. To a layperson, to a judge without technical training, It looks completely legitimate. Proving it in court quickly is going to be difficult. You're looking at weeks of testimony, appeals, expert witnesses from both sides. We don't have weeks, I said quietly. The merger closes in 6 days. Dr. Yang gave me a sympathetic look. Then you need to find another way to stop it. On the drive back to Ohio, Patricia and I brainstormed strategies. We could go public, try to get media attention. We could contact Westfield Corp directly and warn them about the fraud. We could try to get a different judge to hear the injunction. But everything took time we didn't have. When I got home that evening, Angela called my cell phone. She was whispering like she didn't want to be overheard. Juanita, I need to see you. Can you meet me somewhere? Not at the company. Somewhere private. We met at a coffee shop in the next town over, a place where we were unlikely to run into anyone who knew us. Angela arrived carrying 2 large cardboard boxes, the kind used for storing files. She looked exhausted and frightened. I've been going through old records, she said quietly. Files from before Brad became CEO. Financial records, board minutes, correspondence. I wanted to see if there was anything that could help you. She pushed the boxes across the table to me. I found something. It's bad, Juanita. Really bad. I spent the next 2 days going through those boxes. Angela had pulled 10 years of financial records, cross-referencing expense reports, vendor payments, and bank statements. And buried in all that paper was a clear pattern. Brad had been stealing from Hartwell Industries for at least 8 years. It was sophisticated embezzlement. He'd created fake vendor accounts, shell companies with legitimate-sounding names. He'd approve inflated invoices, pay them from company accounts, and the money would disappear into offshore accounts. Sometimes it was $20,000. Sometimes it was $100,000. Over 8 years, it added up to nearly $3 million. But more than that, I understood why he needed the merger to go through. Westfield Corp's due diligence had been cursory, focused on assets and revenue rather than detailed accounting. Once the companies merged and the financial systems integrated, the embezzlement would be nearly impossible to trace. The accounting irregularities would be buried in the chaos of combining 2 companies. If the merger failed, if anyone looked closely at Hartwell's books, Brad would go to prison. I called Patricia immediately. This is it, I told her. This is how we stop him. Patricia came over that night. We spread all the documents out on my dining room table and went through everything methodically. By 2 a.m, we had a clear picture of the embezzlement scheme. This is enough to stop the merger and send Brad to prison, Patricia said. We need to get this to the board, to the authorities, to Westfield Corp. I was exhausted but exhilarated. Finally, I had the weapon I needed to fight back. I went to bed at 3 a.m. and actually slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. I had evidence. I had proof. Brad was finished. I woke up at 7 to my phone ringing. It was Patricia, and she sounded panicked. Where are the documents? She asked immediately. What do you mean? The financial records Angela gave you. Where are they? In my car, I said. I was going to bring them to your office this morning. I ran outside in my pajamas. My car was parked in the driveway where I'd left it, but the driver's side window was smashed. Glass littered the driveway. The door was hanging open. My laptop was gone from the passenger seat, the laptop where I'd scanned all the documents. No, I whispered. No. I ran back inside. The boxes of physical documents had been in my home office. I sprinted upstairs. The office door was open. Papers were scattered everywhere, but the boxes were gone. My backup hard drive was gone. Even the USB drive where I'd saved copies was gone from my desk drawer. Someone had broken into my house while I was sleeping and stolen everything. I called the police. They came, took a report, dusted for fingerprints, but they treated it like a routine burglary. Random crime. Nothing we can do unless the items turn up at a pawn shop. That afternoon, while I was at the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Jake and Emma walking out of their school. The message below it said, "Drop everything, or they're next." I showed it to the police. They said they'd look into it, but seemed skeptical. Could be a prank. Could be someone you know messing with you. But I knew it wasn't a prank. Brad had people watching my children. He'd hired someone to break into my house. He'd eliminated the evidence that could destroy him. And now he was threatening my kids. I called Patricia from the parking lot of the police station. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely speak. He took everything, all the evidence, and now he's threatening Jake and Emma. Patricia was silent for a long moment. Then, Juanita, maybe you should consider backing down, just for now, until we can figure out a way to keep your kids safe. But if I back down, he wins. He gets the merger, he gets the company, he gets away with everything. I know, Patricia said quietly, but at least your children would be safe. I sat in my car in that parking lot for over an hour, staring at the photo of my kids on my phone. Jake with his backpack slung over one shoulder, Emma holding her clarinet case, both of them completely unaware that someone was watching them, photographing them, threatening them. I'd found the weapon to defeat Brad, and he'd taken it away and raised the stakes higher than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting for my company or my marriage anymore. I was fighting to keep my children safe, and I had no idea how to do both. I had 3 days until the merger closed. I'd lost all the evidence of Brad's embezzlement. The legal system had failed me. My own children wouldn't speak to me. My friends had abandoned me. But I couldn't give up. If I gave up now, Brad won everything. I decided to go public. I contacted Helen Crawford, an investigative reporter for the local news station. Helen had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption and taking down powerful people. I'd seen her work, the way she held CEOs accountable, the way she asked tough questions that made them squirm. I called her office and explained I had information about fraud at a major local company. She agreed to meet me that afternoon at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway across town. Helen was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a direct manner. She listened as I told her everything: the embezzlement, the forged power of attorney, the stolen evidence, the threats. I showed her the text message with the photo of my kids. "This is a hell of a story," she said when I finished. "But I need evidence. I can't publish accusations without proof." "The evidence was stolen," I said desperately. "But I can tell you where to look. I can give you the names of the shell companies, the bank account numbers I remember. You have resources I don't have. You can investigate." Helen nodded slowly. "Let me see what I can do. Give me 24 hours. I left that meeting feeling a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Helen could uncover what I couldn't. Maybe the media could expose Brad in a way the legal system hadn't. But I'd underestimated Brad one more time. The next morning, at 10 o'clock, Brad held a press conference. It was covered by all the local news stations, including Helen's. I watched it on my laptop from my kitchen, my coffee going cold as I stared at the screen. Brad stood at a podium outside Hartwell Industries headquarters, looking tired and worried. Behind him stood several board members, Gregory Walsh and Diane. She had her hand on his shoulder supportively. "Today I'm here to address some very difficult personal matters," Brad began, his voice heavy with emotion. "My wife, Juanita, has been suffering from a mental health crisis for several months. As her husband and someone who loves her deeply, I've been trying to get her the help she needs. But instead of accepting help, she's been making increasingly delusional accusations against me, against this company, and against our family." He pulled out his phone and held it up to the cameras. "These are text messages my wife sent me over the past few weeks." He read them aloud. "You're stealing from the company. You forged documents. Everyone's conspiring against me. I know the truth. I never sent those messages, but they were coming from my phone number. Somehow he'd spoofed them, or hacked my phone, or created fake screenshots. They sounded paranoid and unhinged." Brad continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I've tried to protect her privacy, to handle this within our family. But yesterday she approached a reporter with wild conspiracy theories about embezzlement and fraud. None of it is true. It's all part of her delusions." He gestured to Diane. "Diane has been a family friend for years, and she's been helping me support our children through this difficult time. Jake and Emma are terrified of their mother's behavior. And then, most devastatingly, he brought Jake and Emma forward. They stood on either side of him, both looking uncomfortable but clearly coached. Emma was crying. "We're really worried about Mom," Jake said stiffly, reading from what was obviously a prepared statement. "She's been acting really strange. We feel safer staying with Dad right now." The press conference went viral within hours. The local news ran segments about it every hour. Brad was the concerned husband trying to help his mentally ill wife. I was the crazy woman making false accusations. My phone started ringing constantly. Reporters wanting comments. My mother calling in tears, asking if I was okay, if I needed to be hospitalized. Margaret and other friends leaving voicemails about how they were praying for me. Helen Crawford called me that afternoon. Her voice was professional but cold. "I can't pursue this story. After that press conference, if I publish anything supporting your claims, it looks like we're exploiting someone with mental health issues. I'm sorry, but I have to pass." I sat on my kitchen floor, my phone in my hand, and felt the full weight of what Brad had done. He hadn't just discredited me, he'd made it impossible for anyone to believe me. Anyone who tried to help me now would look like they were taking advantage of a sick woman. The story dominated local news for the next 2 days. Concerned husband, troubled wife, family in crisis. Some of the coverage was sympathetic to me, suggesting I needed help and support. But all of it painted me as unstable, delusional, someone whose words couldn't be trusted. The judge in the custody case saw the press conference. He issued a temporary order restricting my access to Jake and Emma pending a psychological evaluation. I was allowed supervised visits only, 2 hours a week, with a social worker present. When I went to that first supervised visit, Emma wouldn't hug me. Jake wouldn't even look at me. They sat across the table in the social services office, arms crossed, looking like I was a stranger. Diane had been taking them to their activities, helping with homework, being the stable mother figure while I was cast as the crazy person who might hurt them. Patricia called me the morning the custody order came through. Her voice was defeated. "Juanita, we're losing everything. The merger closes tomorrow morning. Brad's attorney has filed a motion to have you removed from the company entirely, citing your compromised mental state as a threat to shareholder value. The judge is likely to grant it." "So it's over," I said quietly. Patricia didn't answer right away. Then, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I'd tried to fight back. I'd tried to expose the truth. But Brad had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. He'd stolen my evidence, threatened my children, destroyed my reputation, and turned my own kids against me. He'd used the media, the legal system, and my own friends to paint me as someone who couldn't be believed. Tomorrow morning, he'd close the merger. He'd get away with embezzling $3 million. He'd take full control of my father's company. He'd get custody of our children. And I'd be left with nothing except a reputation as an unstable woman who'd had a breakdown. I sat in my empty house that night, the house that would probably be his soon too, and wondered how I'd gotten here. 2 weeks ago, I'd owned half a company. Now I'd lost everything. Brad had called me just a woman, not an asset. And then he'd systematically proven it by taking away everything that made me powerful. I went to bed that night feeling more defeated than I'd ever felt in my life. The merger would close at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was over. I woke up at midnight. I hadn't meant to sleep, but exhaustion had pulled me under for a few hours. I sat up in bed, disoriented, and checked my phone. 12:14 in the morning. In less than 9 hours, Brad would finalize the merger, and I would lose everything permanently. I got out of bed and walked downstairs. The house was dark and silent. I turned on one small lamp in the kitchen and sat at the table where I'd eaten thousands of meals with my family, back when I'd still had a family. There was a bottle of sleeping pills in the bathroom cabinet upstairs. My doctor had prescribed them months ago when I'd been having trouble sleeping. The bottle was almost full. I'd barely used them. I thought about how easy it would be to take all of them, to just disappear, to stop fighting a battle I'd already lost. No one would be surprised. After the press conference, after the news coverage showing how unstable I was, People would say it made sense. They'd say I'd been struggling. They'd feel sorry for Brad, left to raise two teenagers alone. They'd probably talk about mental health awareness at my funeral. I sat in that dark kitchen for a long time, thinking about giving up, about how much easier it would be to just let Brad win. My phone rang at 2:14 in the morning. The sound was so sudden and loud in the silent house that I nearly dropped it. The screen said, "Unknown number." I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Juanita?" It was Angela, whispering urgently. "Are you awake?" "Yes," I said. "What's wrong?" "I'm at the office. Brad's here. So is Gregory Walsh. They've been drinking, celebrating. They think they've won. And they're talking, Juanita. They're saying things they wouldn't say if they were sober. And I've been recording everything." "What?" I felt suddenly wide awake. I set up my phone in the bookshelf in Brad's office. "I've been recording his conversations for 3 weeks, ever since I gave you those financial documents. I know it's probably illegal, but I don't care anymore. And tonight, they're saying everything. The forgery, the embezzlement, all of it. They think no one can touch them." "Angela," I breathed. "Can you send me the recordings?" "I'm sending them right now. There's 7 hours of audio over the past 3 weeks. Tonight's conversation is the most damning." Brad just admitted he forged the power of attorney. He admitted he hired someone to break into your house and steal the documents. He's talking about plans to hide assets in the Cayman Islands after the merger closes. He even admitted why he married you, Juanita. He said, and I quote, "That stupid woman never realized I married her for her father's company, not for love." I felt tears streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. "I'm sending everything to your email right now," Angela continued. "The files are big, so it might take a few minutes, but you'll have them." My laptop was open on the kitchen table. I pulled it toward me and refreshed my email. Files started appearing. Audio files, labeled with dates and times. "Angela," I said, my voice shaking. Thank you. Thank you so much." "Stop him," she said fiercely. "Stop him for all of us. For your father. For everyone he's hurt." She hung up. I sat there, staring at the audio files downloading onto my computer. I had evidence again. Real evidence, in Brad's own voice, admitting to everything. But it was 2:30 in the morning. The merger closed at 9. Even if I called Patricia right now, even if we rushed to file an injunction, no judge would see us before 9 in the morning. Brad had timed everything perfectly. He'd won on logistics. And then I remembered. There was a board meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. A final meeting where the board would sign the merger documents officially right before the closing at 9. But Brad had put the word out to building security. After my supposedly unstable behavior, after the press conference, I'd been flagged as someone who shouldn't be allowed into the building. The security guards had been told to call Brad if I showed up. There was also still a restraining order keeping me away from him. I called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, sounding groggy. "Juanita, what's wrong?" "I have recordings," I said rapidly. Angela recorded Brad confessing to everything. The forgery. The embezzlement. All of it. "We have evidence." Patricia was suddenly alert. "Send them to me right now." I forwarded the files. Patricia was silent for several minutes as she listened. Then, "This is incredible. This is everything we need. But the merger closes in 6.5 hours. There's a board meeting at 8, I said. If I can get there, if I can play these recordings before they sign the merger documents, I can stop it." Patricia hesitated. "Juanita, you can't get into the building. Security won't let you in. And if you violate the restraining order, Brad could have you arrested." "Then what do I do?" I asked desperately. "I have the evidence. I have the truth. How do I use it?" We sat in silence for a moment. Then Patricia said slowly, "You need media. If you show up with cameras, with reporters, security can't physically bar you without it looking terrible. And if you're surrounded by media, Brad can't have you arrested without creating a huge scene. I thought about Helen Crawford. She'd backed away from the story after the press conference, but that was before I had evidence. If I could give her actual proof, recordings of Brad confessing, she'd have to cover it. I called Helen. It took 6 tries before she answered. Her voice thick with sleep. "This better be good," she said. "It is. I have recordings of my husband confessing to embezzlement, forgery, and fraud. His own voice, admitting everything. If you come with me to Hartwell Industries at 7:45 this morning with a camera crew, I'll give you the biggest story of your career." Helen was quiet for a beat. "Send me a sample of the audio, right now." I sent her a 2-minute clip of Brad laughing about forging the power of attorney. Helen called back 3 minutes later. "I'll be there with a crew at 7:30. Don't go in without us." I hung up and looked at the clock. 5:47 in the morning. I had 2 hours. I showered, put on my best suit, the navy one I'd worn to my father's funeral 7 years ago. I did my makeup carefully, making sure I looked put together, professional, sane. I couldn't look like the unstable woman from Brad's press conference. I had to look like someone who owned half a company and was about to take it back. I arrived at Hartwell Industries at 7:28. Helen's news van was already there, along with 2 other vans from competing stations. Word had gotten out that something was happening. Helen met me in the parking lot. Her cameraman and sound guy were with her. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's go." We walked toward the main entrance as a group. I could see through the glass doors that 2 security guards were inside. As soon as they saw me, one of them reached for his radio, but we pushed through the doors before they could react. Helen's camera was already rolling. "Excuse me, ma'am," one guard said, stepping forward. "You're not authorized to be in this building." "I own 48% of this company," I said clearly, loudly enough for the camera to pick up. "I'm a major shareholder, and I'm attending a board meeting." The guard looked uncertain. "Ma'am, I have instructions to call Mr. Hartwell if you show up." "Then call him," Helen said, thrusting a microphone toward the guard. "Tell him the press is here and we have questions about embezzlement and corporate fraud." The guard's face went pale. He stepped aside. We walked through the lobby, into the elevator, up to the 3rd floor. The other news crews followed. It was a parade of cameras and reporters, and I was leading them. We reached the boardroom at 7:54. Through the glass walls, I could see them all inside, Brad at the head of the table, the board members in their seats, Gregory Walsh next to Brad, papers spread out in front of them, ready to sign. I opened the door and walked in, Helen and her camera right behind me. Brad's head snapped up. His face went from confusion to rage in an instant. "Get out," he shouted. "Security!" "I own 48% of this company," I said, my voice steady and strong. "I'm here to vote on this merger." The boardroom erupted. Board members talking over each other. Gregory Walsh standing up trying to take control. Brad yelling about the restraining order, about how I wasn't allowed to be here. And then I pulled out my phone and connected it to the conference room's audio system. My hands were shaking, but I managed to pull up the audio files Angela had sent me. I pressed play. Brad's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Yeah, I forged the power of attorney. Easiest thing in the world." Scanned her signature from some old document, dropped it onto the new one. Walsh notarized it without even checking. The room went silent. I played another clip. "I've been skimming from the company for years. 3 million, give or take. Those fake vendor accounts were brilliant. Once the merger goes through, it'll all disappear into the accounting chaos." Harold, the CFO, stood up, his face white. "One more clip. That stupid woman never realized I married her for her father's company, not for love. She was always just a means to an end. The company was the prize. She was just the wrapper I had to unwrap to get it." I stopped the recording and looked around the room. Every single person was staring at Brad. His face had gone from red to gray. His mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. "This is the man you were about to make CEO of your merged company," I said to the board members. A man who's been stealing from you for years. A man who forged legal documents. A man who's been playing you all for fools. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward. He was one of the executives from Westfield Corp. "Is this true?" he asked Brad. "Have you been embezzling from Hartwell Industries?" Brad tried to speak, but nothing came out. He looked at Gregory Walsh, who was already gathering his papers, clearly preparing to run. "Westfield Corp is withdrawing from this merger immediately," the executive said. "We'll be conducting our own investigation into these allegations. If they're true, we'll be cooperating with law enforcement." 3 of the board members stood up and announced their immediate resignations. They wanted nothing to do with the liability that was about to rain down on Hartwell Industries. The remaining board members looked at each other in panic. "I move that we remove Bradford Hartwell as CEO effective immediately," one of them said. "Seconded," said another. The vote was unanimous. 5 board members remaining, 5 votes to remove Brad. And then one of them, a woman named Carol Zhang, who'd been silent through most of this, looked at me. "I move that we install Juanita Hartwell as interim CEO pending a full investigation and restructuring." The vote was unanimous again. Brad was still sitting in his chair, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Gregory Walsh had actually fled the room. Helen's camera captured everything. And then, as if on cue, 2 police officers entered the boardroom. Patricia must have called them. They approached Brad, and one of them pulled out handcuffs. "Bradford Hartwell, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and forgery." They read him his rights while Helen's camera rolled. Brad was handcuffed and led out of the boardroom. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me. The story went viral within hours. Every news outlet in the state covered it. The video of Brad being arrested in the boardroom was played on repeat. By that evening, it was national news. Corrupt CEO exposed by his wife. The corporate scandal that shocked Ohio. My reputation was restored instantly. Everyone who'd believed Brad's press conference now felt foolish. My friends called, apologizing. The judge in the custody case immediately reversed his decision. Jake and Emma came home that night, crying and apologizing, saying Diane had been coaching them, manipulating them. Over the next month, everything changed. Brad was formally charged with multiple felonies. He was facing 10 to 15 years in prison. Gregory Walsh lost his law license and was facing charges of his own. Diane resigned from the company before she could be fired. The board appointed me as permanent CEO. Patricia became our new general counsel. Angela was promoted to executive assistant to the CEO, with a huge raise in stock options. Westfield Corp reached out again, this time wanting to discuss a partnership rather than a merger, with me at the helm. We negotiated terms that were favorable to Hartwell Industries and protected our employees. Jake and Emma started therapy to work through everything they'd been through. It took time, but slowly, our relationship healed. 6 months later, I sat in my father's old office. It was mine now. I'd had it redecorated, removing all traces of Brad. But I'd kept my father's photo on the desk. He was smiling in the picture, standing in front of the original machine shop he'd built into an empire. Helen Crawford came to do a follow-up interview. She'd won a journalism award for her coverage of the story. She set up her camera in my office, and we talked for an hour about everything that had happened. At the end, she asked me, "What would you say to women who are going through something similar? Who are being told they're not enough, that they don't matter?" I thought about that question carefully. I thought about standing in Brad's office that night, hearing him call me just a woman, not an asset. I thought about every moment over the past months when I'd almost given up, when I'd almost believed that he'd won. When someone tries to diminish you, I finally said, they're actually revealing their own fear of your power. Brad didn't dismiss me because I was weak. He dismissed me because I was strong. And that terrified him. I was never just a woman. I was always the asset. The company, the vision, the strength. I just had to remember it. I looked directly at the camera. To every woman out there being told she's not enough, being told to sit down and be quiet, being told she doesn't have what it takes, you're not just surviving their doubt. You're building the empire they'll never see coming. The moment they try to push you down is the moment you discover just how powerful you really are. Helen smiled. That's perfect. After the interview, I sat alone in my office for a while. I looked at my father's picture and felt like I'd finally honored his legacy. He'd built this company from nothing, believing in hard work and integrity. Brad had tried to corrupt it, to steal it, to destroy everything my father had valued. But I'd saved it, not just the company, but what it represented. I'd fought back against someone who'd tried to erase me, and I'd won. I wasn't just the woman who'd been called an asset. I was the woman who'd proven she was the entire foundation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. "Mom, I made first chair in band. Can we celebrate tonight?" I smiled and texted back immediately. "Absolutely. Pick the restaurant. I'm buying." Life wasn't perfect. I was going through a divorce that would probably take another year to finalize. Brad's trial was scheduled for next spring. There were still days when I woke up angry about everything he'd done, everything he'd tried to take from me. But I'd survived, more than survived. I'd taken back my power, my company, my life. And every single day, when I walked into my office at Hartwell Industries, I remembered that I was never just a woman. I was the woman who'd refused to disappear when someone tried to erase her. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life try to make you feel small? Try to convince you that you don't matter? How did you stand up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own strength and worth, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this story and maybe find the courage they need in their own lives. And if you want to hear more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds, about women fighting back against injustice and winning, please subscribe to this channel. We share stories every week that celebrate resilience, courage, and the power we all have inside us. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's being told they're not enough, someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, please share this with them. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that we're so much more than other people's limited vision of us. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, you are never just anything. You are everything you need to be, exactly as you are. Keep fighting. Keep believing. Keep proving them wrong. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never let anyone dim your light.